Story 1. I left the cult I was born and raised in when they encouraged and assisted my family in covering up the 6 years of my brother abusing me. I was threatened with excommunication if I told anyone, whether it be a friend, law enforcement, or even if I sought therapy. I lost everyone, everything I had ever believed in. I rebuilt on the ashes of a past life and have not just survived, but I have thrived. Story 2. I got diagnosed with cancer of my immune system, Hodgkin's lymphoma, right at the start of COVID-19. My first chemotherapy session was February 28, 2020. It very nearly killed me, but I got better. Everything since has very much felt pre-cancer or post-cancer. Story 3. I survived a mass shooting when I was 24 years old, back in 2015. My body is still kicking, but man, if part of me didn't die that day along with some of my coworkers, I'm still not back to normal and probably never will be. Story 4. My car accident happened 5 years ago. I ended up behind a semi-truck with faulty brake lights on a highway at 65 miles per hour, broke my neck, and became paralyzed from the sternum down. September is also Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. Be careful out there, folks. For those interested in more details, there are pictures of my car after the accident, the x-ray of my severed spine and spinal cord before and after surgery, the last selfie I took the day before my accident, and the first picture taken of me after the accident. Unfortunately, I cannot provide links here. Also, feel free to ask me any questions you like about life as a quadriplegic. Story 5. My grandpa's death when I was 14 spelled the end of a traditional family upbringing for me. My mom moved in with my grandma to take care of her. After I graduated from high school 4 years later, I swapped with my mom as she was still working at the time, and I'd have a lot more free time between classes to take care of grandma. I lived with my grandma until I was 33. She passed away. That was a big moment too because I kind of felt like I was free. Not to speak ill of the dead or to say I regret the cards life dealt me, but there were times it was a burden. I felt like there were things I couldn't do in my 20s because I had obligations. Story 6. When I attempted suicide at 14, the air was calm, and my house was eerily quiet. The only reason I didn't pull the trigger was that my cat crawled into my lap, purred, and laid down. I'll never forget how cold it was against my temple, and although I didn't go through with it, something in me died that day. Story 7. Best friend's suicide. I have a huge gap in my memory from when it happened, about 3 to 4 days. But nothing is the same afterward. I visit the cemetery every month and still message him, but knowing that I'll never get a reply. Almost everything is, B was still there when it happened, B wasn't there. Story 8. August 31st, 2023. The day I received my first intravenous ketamine treatment. The day my will to live was reignited and the first day in a very, very long time that I didn't feel like killing myself. Story 9. In 2009 in Afghanistan, the Haqqani network detonated a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device in the middle of a health clinic where we, the United States Army and the Afghan National Army, were providing services. I spent the next 6 hours moving the bodies of women and children to the forward operating base casualty collection point. A lot of things happened on that deployment, but that incident affected me the most. My life has been pretty messed up ever since. Story 10. As a pilot who was in the air over the Atlantic, destined for Toronto, September 11th changed everything in the airline industry and the way I looked at the world. Story 11. Watching my dog die. I feel like I can never go back to the days before he passed, as I can't imagine not being able to pet him or talk to him anymore. It's been 2 years since he died, and I still miss him so much. If anyone else has lost a pet, I hope you are coping better than I am. Story 12. My cat died. I did not realize how unhappy I was with my life and how much emotional heavy lifting that little fur ball was doing until she was gone. I lost some people I loved immediately after losing my cat, but I think I would have coped differently if I had still had her. Instead, I kind of went crazy and started ripping out everything from my life that was making me so miserable, including coming out of the closet, moving to a new country that made me feel safer, not taking abuse from people anymore, and pursuing an interest that does not make me just come home and shake. I never thought I would make it to 30, but I am 35 now and I actually kind of like my life after the intense pruning. Thanks for getting me through it and making sure I knew what love felt like. Little Miss. Story 13. The ex showed up at my door pregnant. I did the right thing and she moved in. Then we got married. 14 months later, we were divorced and I was a single parent. A stark difference before and after. I cut my hair, got a job, and went straight within a week. Before, I was a metalhead hoodlum with long hair, selling pot out of my crash pad. After, I was a responsible dad. You know, it's funny how friends disappear when you close the party down. Story 14. My family moved from the town I grew up in to the city I live in now. It was a very clear before and after for me. I still remember the moment our moving truck left town that last day. Story 15. This doesn't compare to any of yours, but it still marked a change in me regardless. When a woman I truly loved left me over the phone. I had seen it coming and had done everything in my power to stop it. In hindsight, I had lost a lot of myself in the relationship, and it hurt a lot. I learned a few lessons from it. 1. No matter how hard you try to love someone, if they don't love you or have checked out, it's better to leave because it won't get better. 2. You can do everything right and still fail. 3. Life will move on and it will get better. You just have to feel the pain and trust the process of healing. Story 16. The death of my Sicilian grandmother. When she was alive, it was all about Sunday dinner at her house with the whole family. After her death, we all went our separate ways. Story 17. Long story. I had a bad trip on some research chemicals. It gave me drug-induced PTSD. I was never the same. Actually, it took some good trips to get back to livable. But I became socially awkward, and my mind and personality were never the same. I felt like I lost myself. Story 18. Leaving a highly controlling fundamentalist religion at age 45, I had to start life over and lost many friends and family in the process. However, it was the best decision I've ever made. Story 19. Graduating from art school marked a clear division in my life. The period before that event and everything that followed. Moving back to Canada, trying to build a life, and all that has happened up to the present day. It was, in essence, just another day, one I barely remember, but it represented a definitive end to one chapter and the beginning of another. I've experienced a few similar transitions in other phases of my life, but that one stands out as particularly significant. Story 20. My wife started sleeping with her boss, and I was then fired from my longtime job a few weeks later back in 2015. How incredible life became just a short time later is something I would have never foreseen. Story 21. I developed an alcohol problem in my mid-20s. The second of the two lowest points in my life came when my mom discovered me at my place after a 3-day drinking binge. That was the moment I decided to stop drinking and take life more seriously. Story 22. Losing my dad was that moment for me. One day, everything felt normal, and the next, my world flipped upside down. It made me realize how fragile life is and to appreciate the little things. Story 23. When I handed my daughter over to the nurse when she was 12 months old so the surgeon could remove half of her brain. She was having around 100 seizures a day at that point, and there were no other options. Story 24. Mom's death. I thought I'd had moments of before and afters before that, but nothing comes close. I've never been the same again. It's been a couple of years, and I hate where life went and where it will continue to go. Story 25. Either the day my mom's cancer diagnosis was confirmed, or the day she died from it, holds significant reasons for both. Please ensure you get your mammograms and, if possible, quit smoking. Story 26. Realizing someone I considered my friend was horrible to me and sexually assaulted me at 12. They were 13. They were using me to experiment to figure out themselves, while I was uncomfortable. Story 27. My dad was involved in a pretty severe accident, which resulted in short-term memory loss. Pretty much everything I loved about him is gone. He was also the reason we moved states almost 10 years ago. Story 28. The death of my son was closely followed by the end of my marriage due to my ex-husband having an affair, which happened around the same time my child died. I'm really not sure if I want to date again after that. I just want a calm life with my child, who I had via in vitro fertilization with a sperm donor, after my husband ripped my heart out. Story 29. The birth of my child changed everything. Life before was carefree, but now every decision revolves around what is best for them. It is like seeing the world through a whole new lens. Story 30. When I returned home after 5 years living abroad, I found myself in a radically transformed environment. I moved to Europe in 2016 to acquire citizenship and to study Italian and English. My initial plan was to spend 2 to 3 years and then return to my home country. However, life had other plans. I met my wife, secured a good job, traveled around, and rebuilt my life there. After 5 years, I returned to Brazil and a lot had changed. My mother had sold the house I grew up in, my sisters had grown up, and life had happened to my friends as well. They got married, had children, moved, and so on. That moment felt very strange. Part of me had expected everything to remain the same, that people would still be there. Despite always talking with my friends and knowing everything about their lives, the realization hit me hard. It clicked. My original home was no longer home. My home was across the ocean, in a country that I do not formally call mine. Story 31. Childbirth. I had a very traumatic experience. Even 6 months later, it haunts me in my sleep. I am still going through postpartum depression and even had suicidal thoughts. I love my child more than anything, but it is hard to be depressed and completely alone with a baby. Story 32. When my dad ended his life, there was everything before, and now there's everything after. It feels like it happened to the person I used to be in the life I had before this one. Story 33. I had a 12-hour operation as a child and apparently died halfway through. I don't remember anything other than standing in the corner of the operating room, watching them work on me, and being tapped on the shoulder. That's all. However, even 40 years later, I still have the feeling that I just want to go home. No matter how good or bad life has gotten, that feeling has never left. Whatever happened, my subconscious self still remembers and seems to long to go back to wherever I was. That, and moving back to Australia after living in Ontario for most of my life up to that point. Finding out the one thing that I loved most couldn't come with me. Having to find her a home, and up until a couple of years ago, believing she forgot all about me and lived her best kiddie life right to the end. Being told she ran away from her new home 1 week after we left Canada. For 20 years, I thought she was loved and cared for, when she was actually lost and afraid. Story 34. My father's prolonged illness, half a year in the intensive care unit, resulted in his eventual death. Not only was his prolonged suffering and pain devastating, but the way his extended family treated us after he finally died was added icing on the cake. We were still reeling from everything for the next few years, and just as some sense of normalcy started to return, bam, COVID. Story 35. My dad relapsed after being sober for over 2 decades when I was 11 years old. That kicked off him going to rehab. My parents nearly divorced, and kids at school made my life very difficult. Story 36. Moving back to my hometown after leaving for an ex who turned out to be an awful person was a difficult decision. I also left because my grandmother had just passed away, so I was in flight mode. I moved back home in 2021, and everything has been wildly different but way better than before. Story 37. It was a perfect storm. Father died suddenly, mother was relegated to a nursing home, and the adult son broke up with his girlfriend and moved in with his 2-year-old son. Then we had dad's funeral, dealt with the estate, and then the COVID lockdown happened. The spouse quit work. All within the first 10 weeks of 2020. It was hell. Story 38. My best friend, travel companion, and the most fun, supportive person I've ever known, died after only 5 years of close friendship. Before his death, my life was amazing. We traveled the world. I asked for nothing and got everything, and he was always there to share an amazing meal and conversation with. We laughed so much together. After his death, my life became a depressing, hollow, pointless existence. I have never connected with anyone the same way in the 10 years since, and I have pretty much become a recluse. Life just doesn't have the same sweetness. He was the highlight of my life. Story 39. A car accident resulted in the death of a child very important to me and my children. He was not my birth son, but my heart and soul felt it. And I will never be the same, but I heard from him through mediums. He sees us, he knows what we have been through, and he knows our pain, and he loves us. He apologized for what we went through after losing him. I love you so much. Story 40. My family relocated to the city I currently live in from the town I grew up in. I can still clearly recall the exact minute our moving truck departed from town on the final day. Story 41. 2. Getting divorced from someone I was with for 15 years. Next was needing to get lower back surgery, which fixed the issue, but I have to do all my sports in a more careful way. Story 42. My divorce was a cascade of events during that time. Loss of my home and finances, opportunity for graduate school, my dog died, and my father died of cancer. Story 43. At 51, I would have to say there are at least half a dozen. If I had to choose the biggest one, though, it was when I decided to get a job at a newspaper when I was 16. Literally, everything that happened after that happened because of that decision. I wouldn't have met any of the same people, wouldn't have done any of the same things, wouldn't be where I am now, might not even be alive anymore. Or maybe I'm having the time of my life. Who knows? Can't know. It's fun to think about. Story 44. Marrying my current husband helped me become the person I am now. More confident and able to finally come out from under the thumb of my narcissistic mother.